Finish him!
Job's done.
Pong! It's the first video game.
In those days, the programmers created the sounds.
I think they wanted to create an audience and cheers, and at the end they were just left with a tone.
Definitely limited to the waveforms they could make.
They didn't have samples. So they had a chip that made sounds.
They could only get up to a certain pitch because that took some horsepower away from the rest of the game.
People have probably heard that sound tens of thousands of times, and it's one little tone. Amazing. Going into cardiac arrest.
Da, 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 da. It starts creating tension.
You saw it in a bunch of games. You're about to run out of time. So what do? They make the music play back faster.
That's one of the tricks. Change rhythm to change speed.
That sound increasing in frequency.
He timed that to the human heartbeat.
It's around 60 beats per minute, something like that.
As that sound got quicker, his or her heart rate was being affected as well.
That was probably the first time a bit of psychoacoustics was finding its way into game design. Waka waka.
It's the sound of insatiability.
We started with a tone, and now we modulated it. So it's not really going bam, 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 bam. They wanted to create a certain amount of emotion with Donkey Kong.
There's this almost hearkening to the way that cartoon sounds behave.
So it's a little bit of Carl Stalling, the composers to all the Bugs Bunny. Dum, 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 Flintstones, off. That's all woodblocks. And he used orchestras because sound effects weren't there.
I want to say like on the NES, the actual RAM was like 128K or something like that. One of those things where they embraced the limitations that they had.
The easiest waveform that will come out of this process would be a square wave, but as you change what would be called the duty cycle, that is making it more like a rectangle that's, up more than it's down or down more than it's up, that changes the timbre both when it's static like that or when it's moving over time. That's when it gets very interesting.
It's almost like a planned demolition. But there's also a bit of what we call party at the beginning of it. There's the bidim bidim.
The Game Boy had 4 channels of audio.
It was even limited compared to the bigger consoles.
3 of them were they're called PSG sounds, like a bleep or a bloop.
But again, they had an oscillator, maybe it could do FM, it could do a little bit of modulation.
The 4th channel was what's called white noise. So that was just like if you made it really low, sounded like an explosion.
Using modulating synthesizer, wah, 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 wah. It almost has a laughing quality.
Putting a little pitch shift in there to kind of replicate.
It's kind of fun when games tease you. Is that the best you can do?
It's the sound of progress.
Sound can often be just the perfect tool to reassure you that you've accomplished something.
If we feel like you failed, we use dissonance. So when you do something consonant, it actually has sympathetic vibrations.
You kind of start low and go high.
It's the psychology of giving you that ba-down. This is a transition sound. It's not as much iconic, but it serves the purpose from transitioning going down the pipes.
Covers up the fact that, hey, they're loading out a bunch of stuff in the back and then they're loading in a bunch of stuff in front of you or underneath you.
Your first and possibly most important ability.
It tracks the motion of it so well.
It has the feeling of elasticity.
The very definition of interaction being signaled by sound.
And like so many things in music and design, it's just the feel. It's like, yeah, I think that works.
If I go like this, the attack is that first crack you hear, bang! And what they're doing, they're using a long attack on that white noise to almost, to replicate something passing through the air. Genius.
It felt really satisfying because everything else was so tonal around it, and this was more broadband. Disappointment. Sound of Mega Man dying.
You died all the time in Mega Man.
That sound it's just an abrupt halt.
We are in an era now where probably at least 4 things can be played at one time out of the little speaker.
It's like the slot machine. And the coins come out and everybody notices and everyone goes, woo, somebody won. It's that same psychological feel with this.
I think everybody kind of tries to imitate that sound in one way or another when they're trying to create pickup sounds. It's that sound that you get, you're like, hey, you did a good thing.
The collection sounds were always the toughest sounds to do from a sound design standpoint.
Video games started having dedicated sound chips.
Everything was given a priority between 0 and 127. The ring sounds would always get the highest priority.
The palette just got bigger.
There's a theorem called the Nyquist Theorem that essentially says in order for a sound to be able to have audible frequencies above a certain amount, it has to have twice as much of the sample rate. If you hear on that sound, not only is it resampled to be smaller, the bit rate of it is also a lot smaller as well in order to fit it in the memory.
What these sounds do is give presence. They start giving the characters a voice.
Hadouken from Japanese literally translates to wave, motion, fist.
Sonic branding is what they did with this. It just felt like it just swept over the entire world really fast. When this one tone gets to this one portion, that's when I start holding accelerate so that I can get a speed boost at the start.
Certain sounds that are less iconic, but they service the product.
It's a sound that gets your attention. So that's why ambulances and sirens have, that's why their sirens go up or down over time. It's how we're wired as humans. Yeah, those are terrifying at the time.
Everyone wanted to use sampled sounds, but there'd be a budget of memory. You get real creative how you jam all those sounds in there and how to make a 1/4 second long, barely telephone fidelity sound still have the impact you want, to sound like something frightening.
This is the beginning of positional audio. Should I move you in a direction? Should I not move you in a direction? Now sound starts entering into the world of gameplay and not just emotion.
Pokemon, and from the Game Boy version, the original, everyone's favorite, I think.
The last part is basically noise.
Picking up stuff, selecting things in a menu, those are kind of more the bleep and bloopy type of things.
In FM, you make it go so fast. Ba, 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 ba. It starts getting a metallic tone, and it ends with creates finality, and it services the end.
So the challenge of doing a menu sound, those are some of the toughest sounds as well, because this is something that the player is going to hear hundreds of thousands of times.
Final Fantasy is one of those franchises that's known for its music.
It's really underscore. Gives you that emotion like a normal score would in any other medium.
That sense of accomplishment, that fanfare, trumpets everywhere, the banners flying, victory, that's what that is.
Definitely proved to be timeless. Shows up in a lot of concerts played by symphony orchestras these days.
Snake, what happened? Snake.